Good evening, and good evening to you all. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being there. Welcome to tonight's Helping Kids in Anxious Moments. This is the class for tweens and teens. Last night, we had the class for pre-K through elementary, and that is, if you've got kiddos in both age ranges, and I know many people do, that is certainly accessible on our Facebook page. So it was archived as of last night, so you can just go click and watch. And I want to thank Jerry Kaiser for being here. If you listen closely to her voice, she may sound a little familiar to you, and that's because she's our own Sandy Sober's sister. Hey, come on in. And they are voice twins. kind of an interesting phenomenon.
For sure, yeah.
So Jerry was good enough to come to us from Children's in the cities. She has been with them for over 30 years, 25 in the surgical department, and she is what's called a child life specialist. And I have to admit to ignorance because I had never heard of this position before. I heard about Jerry, and it's a wonderful gift-giving position, it sounds like, because she helps kids that are coming into the medical world navigate the stress that's inherent in that. So a kid's going to come in and have surgery. There is no way that is a stress.
It's a stress for all of us.
Free situation. Yeah. So she helps the kiddos and the parents learn to navigate that. And as you can see here, the goal is to manage it, not eliminate it. So I think that's a wonderful approach. She's got a long history in psychology and worked in other places besides the cities, but she's here with us now to share what she knows. So I'm going to get out of the way. I'm going to pop back behind the camera. So if there's anybody out there that wants to ask a question, please do. Just type it up, and I will send it on to Jerry.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here tonight, and I'm glad everyone's getting a chance to see this later too. As parents, we know how difficult that is to arrange anything in our time, take time for ourselves, let alone take time to think through what it is that we'd like to learn more about just growing up anyway. So to tag on to what you're saying, I am a child life specialist, and so our background is in child development, psychology, that kind of thing, more focused on development. And I work in a surgical center, or I work in the surgery area within the hospital. So most kids, no surprise, aren't really thrilled about coming to the hospital to have surgery. And so my role pretty much mostly is about helping them understand what it is about to happen and help them feel better about it. So if you think of it, and I was going to write this down on the board too, so you guys are just going to have to top this into your head. Stress in and of itself, or being anxious, there's the precursor to that is feeling out of control or perceiving that that you might be out of control. So when you take a topic like surgery, anesthesia, that's the ultimate loss of control. None of us have any control when we're asleep on anesthesia. But if you think about that in your life, and I think too, I'm going to give you guys each something. Does everybody have a pen? Okay. So if not, I'm actually going to give you guys, here it is. I knew it was somewhere. Do you want to pass that around? So everybody gets one of those. So that's the outline. Because I want you guys to kind of take this moment now as we're addressing this, because we've all had anxious moments. And I think especially now that we're talking more about the topic of teenagers and teenagers, all of us having been, I don't know, we've all been a teenager or teenager, recognize the inherent high levels of stress at this particular time in your life, probably the most stressful time in your life. So it's kind of nice right now to take this for yourself to realize how much you already know as individuals what you've come to at this point in your own personal lives on knowing what to do with anxiety. But it's nice to have that reflection both on an experience of yours that made you anxious. So as an adult, on the back of the piece of paper, just jot it down somewhere. I mean, I remember when we signed our first mortgage that was super anxiety produced. I had no idea what they're talking about, and I was anxious enough about it. We ended up having a cousin of mine who was a mortgage banker do our mortgage because I was anxious about actually doing that as a 20-something. That really made me nervous. Or going to the dentist, okay, now I'm just kind of channeling my own things that make me nervous. But right down on the back of the page, what you're thinking about, just take a moment for yourself and jot down a few things that you remember in your own personal adult life that was anxiety producing. So if you write that down, we can refer back to that. And then I would take that on too, especially since we're dealing with teenagers. That's a time in our life we can remember. It's hard to remember much detail about what you did when you were a kid, but write down 1 or 2 times you remember being anxious when you were a teenager too. Because I think some of the advice we think about, it's hard not to compartmentalize advice we would offer a teenager and recognize that in and of ourselves might make us uncomfortable if a coworker tried to support us in an anxious moment. That would actually kind of drive us a little bit crazy. So it helps to separate those things out so you can see the teenagers don't need it much different than we do as adults, but they just need to be respected for where they're at developmentally and their understanding of that. So if you take a couple minutes, I think that sort of helps. And to reiterate too, as you guys are writing that down, and at home, if you want to do that at home too, it's a good idea. We are talking tonight about anxious moments, not the medical diagnosis of anxiety. So just so that we keep those two straight, so this becomes, I think, more of a concern when we're talking about teenagers, because at this time in their life, for a conjuncture of lots of different reasons, mental health illnesses often are diagnosed in late teens. So that's something that I think as parents we're more anxious about. If this behavior that I see with my teenager is normal, or is this something that needs to be concerned, I need to contact my healthcare provider. So if we think about what's normal or what's typical, that anxiety in and of itself, it's a language that we mix up in the English language. We don't have good words for the variety of it. So when we say about we're being anxious, that's not that we have the diagnosis of anxiety. So if I mix these up, let's just keep that on track, that we're on the same page. We're talking about being in stress or an anxious moment. But having that sensation of being anxious is good. That's a good thing. We need to celebrate the fact that we're capable of being anxious. Being anxious is something that protects us. We are animals. It's hard to forget about that. I mean, it's easy to forget about that. But we're animals, and being anxious is something to pay attention to. Similar to the rest of our body, if you feel a discomfort, pain in your body, that's telling you something's up. Why is my knee sore? You investigate that and find out why your knee's sore. So if you're feeling anxious, it's your opportunity to stop and think through, what's making me anxious right now? What is it? Why did I suddenly feel this way? So we want to be careful when we're talking about all emotions. There is no good emotion or bad emotion. They're all valuable and they all have an important part to play. So that's something you want to think about when we're talking to your kids about that. It's not, oh, honey, I don't want you to be scared or you're anxious. You should be anxious. That's silly. Don't be anxious about that. That kind of language is what we're wanting to try and avoid and embrace it ourselves. So, that's a typical. All right, that's something that's helpful to frame out what you're thinking about. This is something we want to have in our life. And also, two regular, typical anxious moments that are developmentally appropriate, those are not of concern. So you would expect a teenager to be concerned about first day of school. Are my friends going to like me? Am I going to make the team? Am I going to get this grade? What am I going to do when I grow up? Is this weird thing on me like important or not? Should I be concerned about all the usual things for teenagers? That's normal. That's healthy. That's part of that developmental age. And that there is always that underlying sense of loss of control. And a good way to, reflecting back on high school experience, I've never met a teenager ever who believed anesthesia was going to work, ever. They could have had, this could be their 50th time of having anesthesia, it could be their first. They could be fully, have an excellent preparation and know exactly what to expect, but they still don't believe anesthesia works. So that's a fear that's a developmental fear that's appropriate, because they understand enough information about what it does, but their brain is not matured yet to the piece of being able to process what that means. So that's a deep divide. So if you guys think about it from your own healthcare experience too, a physician probably would go through the risks of something that's about to happen. And you as an adult listen to the risks and recognize, oh, there's a reason why you have to tell me all the risks, but you're just protecting yourself and you're letting me be fully informed, but I recognize these risks are hardly ever something that actually happens. And so I'm able to discount that, or at least put that in a way I'm not nervous about that. That's not how teenagers take in that information. So it's normal and developmentally appropriate for a teenager to take in information and not be able to process the relativity of that information. So a teenager can do something like say, I think everyone in the class knew they walked in late. So they walked in late, that's a fact. But a teenager will take that information, they walked in late, and assume everyone in the classroom was staring at them. They all knew they walked in. Everyone in the classroom was wondering why they were late. They probably knew they were late because they were actually in the bathroom. They're probably wondering why they were in the bathroom. So the teenagers thinking through all this, where the rest of the kids in the class weren't even paying attention to the fact they walked in late. They got their own things to focus on. We as adults can see that, teenagers can't. So these are normal anxious moments for being an adolescent. When it gets to be more a point of an anxiety disorder, something that's going to raise your red flags and you're going to want to get some further investigation in this, there would be more like things where they're apprehensive without any apparent reason for that. So they get focused on the physicality of some aspect of themselves that makes no logical sense. They assume that because they're scraped and heal right away, they must have leukemia. And they can't get past that piece. Or they assume that because their friend didn't call them back, their friend hates them and is telling everyone in school how horrible they are. That's taking a normative piece and taking it to a place that's not normal. That's not helpful, that's not adaptive. So you want to be more concerned about your teen too if you see a shift in behavior. And teachers are probably the very best people to help. So you want to have a good relationship with your teachers with your kids because they're the ones that are going to notice the change. But grades, luckily, are kind of of emotional behavior. So if their grades suddenly take a drop, that's a good piece too to raise some red flags. Why is that happening? That's when you're getting more into these anxious moments being more medical diagnosis of anxiety. So too, friends are the other piece too. If they suddenly drop all their friends, or their friends have mentioned something to you, or if they're changing their communication with them, a sudden change in behavior is something that's really more indicative of concern. But you as parents always know your kids best, so if it's something that doesn't feel right, always ask. So again, we're just going to be talking about anxious moments. So one of the things we want to do if we're going to start this whole topic is just give kids language to be able to talk about what that means to be anxious. I know this seems odd with teenagers who could probably like totally school us in a vocabulary test, right? But we do have a limited words that we tend to use to describe our emotions. So it's nice as a parent to up your own game. I think it's kind of smart to even think about it from a thesaurus perspective or whatever. Look up different words to describe those things. So instead of just being, you seem mad, you seem perturbed, you seem frustrated, you seem overwhelmed. Use lots of different words so your teenagers got that too. And for that reason too, we were just talking about this with some of you guys that were waiting. Has everybody seen this, if you remember this from back in the day? Okay, so there are lots of different versions of a face scale. This works for teenagers too. When I look at it, I mean, right away, you guys all just kind of smiled when you saw it. It's nice because one of the things I like about that is that every emotion has its equal place, right? But it's also a way to kind of target how you feel, and it gives you better words too. So this particular one's kind of nice. If you go online, there are a lot of options and choices. I saw one that had that was Star Wars characters. Whatever, it's kind of fun to have. And we were reflecting on this, that you can, like having something in your house as a way for your teenager to give you an idea of how they're feeling where they don't have to directly communicate can work really good. So if you have something like this just sitting on your fridge, and you get the little magnet thing that you can just, you can get them online if you want to, but you can just use this one. Grab a cheap magnet that you got from a giveaway, cut a hole in it, and they can put it on whichever one they're actually feeling that day. It's kind of fun because you'll see changes. They'll feel that way, and it's kind of another way to reflect it for them just to let you know how they're feeling without actually telling you how you're feeling. And we had, you'll find other methods like that where you can add to their vocabulary without you even realizing it happened. We had somebody give us poetry, those little poetry, little individual words you can make poet with magnets. So we just stuck them on our dishwasher for fun. And then I just did it because, I don't know, whatever, somebody gave it to us, so you put it up, right? But then I noticed pretty soon the kids were starting to make poems, and some of them were funny. Then I knew they were in a good mood. Some of them were deep and dark. Oh, not such a good mood. And I didn't necessarily know who did, but I could kind of tell from their style of writing. But it was a fun way to change that. And also, too, it kind of reflected that piece that moods change anyway. But as a parent, it was just kind of fun to see what their thoughts were in a way that didn't necessarily have to be direct. So that was just a fun thing. I didn't plan on doing that, but it just happened. So when you're paying attention to your kids in your house, how do you notice how they're feeling? But having things like that that are an indirect way to communicate can be a really great way to do it. There's a lot of studies that have been done with teenagers, because this is such a high age to develop some anxiety issues, and they're comparative note to adults as well. So having anxiety in and of itself is the most common mental illness. It's 18% of us adults, 13% of kids. But one of the issues with just feeling anxious in general, kids don't tend to pick up on that as much, that that's what they're actually feeling or how that affects their life and their response to that. And they can develop some unhealthy ways of dealing with that. So this is our opportunity too to step in and help our kids learn how to deal with stressful events so they can start to develop healthy coping strategies before they're out of the house. So so it's great you guys are here. That's a great way to start all that. So when you're helping develop them their own language and their words, it's just helpful as a person too. Now kids like to swear, of course. We all swear. Swearing in and of itself, there's some interesting studies on that. It actually helps you feel better. So however you want to do this and handle this in your own household, to restrict that swearing however works best for you in your life, but recognize it does have its own value and expression. But I think it's nice then to tie it with a word that would describe the event better than the swear word. So if you're prepared with a whole bunch of different words, it's nice to throw some more out and challenge your kid. Think of 3 words that you could say that would say that better than a swear word. It's kind of fun because that's another way to help develop their language, but also to respect the fact that there is that piece of that time in life where swearing might be the only thing they have available to them to say, and it does have that expression of emotion that sometimes might be the only thing that can nail it. So when you're working with your kids and your teens, it's common at this age to swear because of their limited vocabulary. I think I'm thinking of how else they could describe this up. So you offering them more words is going to help with that. Now the next piece on this is emotional contagion. Have you guys, anybody heard that phrasing? Emotional contagion? It's like really hot right now. Yeah. I think it's just a fancy way of saying we affect each other's emotions. So if you think about a time in your family life or work life, this really happens a lot at work too. Everyone's in a bad mood. Everyone's in a bad mood. You might have walked into that experience being in a good mood, but as soon as you're picking up on this bad mood, you're picking up on it too. Well, so they're going into deeper research to figure out why that is. So the research is in a combination of both cognitive scientists, psychologists, physiologists, because they're looking at how it responds to our body, behavior and social scientists. So this is affects us all, but I think it's especially effective for teenagers or a concern for teenagers. So what the basic idea of this is we mimic behavior we see around us and we take it on without realizing we're doing it. We're animals again, remember we're animals, and if an animal is going to notice something that's danger, they're going to make some sort of sound, and then the other animals will mimic the sound until they figure out what it is that's going on, what is it at the danger point. So it does serve a helpful purpose, but it can also be a hard piece where if everyone's in a bad mood, we're going to affect each other's mood. So parents, you probably have the biggest effect on your child's mood, more than even so their peers do. So sometimes I've noticed this too with my own kids. We're not kids anymore, they're 20-somethings. But if I was in a bad mood, they were quickly in a bad mood. And I would usually blame it on them. You guys are just in a really bad mood. Until I realized, no, wait, it's me who's in the bad mood. So it's a reflective piece that as we're helping kids deal with anxious moments, we have to be respectful of the fact on how we are personally dealing with our own anxiety in that moment. And so there's been some interesting studies with dental work. I don't know how you guys feel about going to the dentist in general. I do not like going to the dentist. And my mother hated it. So even though she was good and she brought us to the dentist, her anxiety around the dentist, I totally felt without even realizing it until I was older and I heard some of the stories on why she didn't like the dentist. But when I was a kid, I just picked up from her that was a scary bad thing. I didn't even know it. I just assumed that was everyone's response to that. So there's been a bunch of studies on dental studies that directly have proven that parents who are anxious about the dentist have children who are anxious about the dentist. So if you think about that in an idea in itself, if your whole family is facing something, how you choose to deal with your stress about that particular event is going to impact your teenager, but it can also be something that be turned around. This can be a great learning experience. Yeah, I'm super stressed, we're moving, and this is a lot of work to do. And so what I'm doing to make it better for myself is I'm making lists. So that works for me. I'm going to make lists so that it's better for moving. You can be teaching your child a skill set, but also too, you're labeling and naming why it is you're stressed. Instead of just charging through the day and trying to still get everything done and still pick everyone up and still get people's tennis shoes or whatever it was they needed and pack at the same time. So this is an opportunity where you can teach a child. But also too, this whole idea of emotional contagion, you can actually physiologically change your physical response to a situation by literally doing something like smiling. So for right now, everybody give this a try. Smile big, like a big old fake smile. I mean, force that cheek to go up. Yeah! Okay, now you're starting to giggle, right? Okay, we all look a little ridiculous with a forced smile on our face, right? But your body tends to then respond to it first. We're mimicking that behavior from each other. But your brain's trying to catch up to that. We're smiling, something must be good. Okay, I'm feeling a little burst of endorphins, which is kind of why, okay, I don't know how you guys feel about the general situation in the country right now, but there's stress, right? So my husband and I have gotten into going online and just YouTubing little short comic skits from late night TV. So I'm too old to stay up late for late night TV, but I can get some of the comic skits. I can feel in a really bad mood, but and really the comedian doesn't have to be that funny. They just stand there and start laughing, or the audience is laughing, and I'm picking up on that feeling. It's like a super easy way to do that. So that old adage that a lot of times you can hear, just put a smile on your face when you walk into something, actually literally helps your body. But the other thing it does too, they found, not only does it make you feel better, but if you're in the moment of making yourself feel better, negative thoughts can't come into that as easily. So if you're forcing yourself to smile, obviously that's not going to work for a long period of time, but it can maybe switch it just enough to take that deep cleansing breath and focus for the next step. So when your teenager is facing something scary, tryouts, asking that cute boy if they want to go out or something, whatever it is they're doing, painting a smile on your face can really help. So it's a little piece of control. And when you get back to that original part where being anxious is because of being a loss of control, anything you can do to feel more in control feels better. So it's a simple thing to do, and it can really, really work. Now, kids, the other piece that impacts this is gender and power and lots of other stuff. So for us as adults, somebody who's in power like your boss is going to impact your emotional content. If your boss is in a bad mood, that's going to have more power than you and than your coworker. Well, for the kids, it's definitely their us parents, but also to their friends. So if they have a friend who's been in a really foul mood lately, they're going to pick up on that too. So it's one of those things that you want to help teach your child to recognize that too. If they're in a bad mood, look around you and see, are you adding to that bad mood in general with you and your friends, or are you feeling it from your friends? And if that's the case, figure out what's going on with your friend. There's a cause and effect to that, instead of just being in that bad mood. But they have more impact on each other. So also too, this whole idea with emotional contagion, another piece that adds to this is kind of how mob behavior gets formed too. So when you think about some of the things we've seen recently, when you have a riot or something like that, someone who actually just happened to be in the physical space wasn't even planning and intending that. But once they see it around them, it's hard not to get caught up into that. So again, with teenagers, if you have one kid who's upset in the classroom, mad at the teacher, that behavior can affect the other kids. So you want to help your teenagers start to learn how to separate what is your emotion, what's the emotion around the other people. Why exactly do you feel that? Instead of, I don't know, I just do. It's not an answer that you're thinking it through. So you can help your kids break it down a little bit to understand where it is, if they are truly feeling if this is their belief system too, or if they're just responding to what's happening around them. And I think that's a healthy way to help kind of navigate social media too, to start to understand what is it that's important to you and what is it you're just picking up from all these messages you're getting into. It's hard not to be affected by the angst that's around you. So you guys, obviously, I talk a lot and talk fast. If you want to interrupt with a story or anything, please just interrupt. But so now just getting basically on ways to help kids cope with dealing with this, with stress in general. As we all know as adults, and we get this harped at us all the time, you want to eat right, you want to sleep, and you want to have a little exercise, right? Everybody's smiling like, oh my God, okay, yeah, exercise, I try. I'm eating my cookie.
Can I just back up for a second?
Sure.
And you were saying about, if the child is in a situation where a friend of theirs is, the moves are sort of bouncing off each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, well, just ask your kid. I mean, what's going on? Or have them pay attention to it. It's like, they don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And they, like, in my experience, my kids aren't going to be like, yeah, my friend's, depressed because their parents are getting divorced or whatever. I mean, they're not going to, like, open right up. Like, how do you
Get them to open up.
pry that open, or just, like what to expect, like how over time. I mean, I kind of keep going back to it, but really, I mean, it's like living 4 lives. It's a lot.
Yep, and especially too, you already touched on it. When you think about it, your kids aren't going to learn this like they learned this is red. That even took a long time for them to learn this is red, right? They had to see red in all kinds of different contexts to understand this is red. The same with this. Nothing you're doing now is going to have an instant moment. They're not. This is a process piece to it. And I think it's especially hard with teenagers. This is a much more challenging age because you talk to your teenager at 7 o'clock in the morning and they act like a 15-year-old. You talk to them at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they act like a 6-year-old. You talk to them at 8 o'clock at night, now they're acting like 21. So it's hard to be on that gauged piece, to be meeting them where they're at and teaching them the pieces that you want to teach them. So one of the pieces, and we'll get into this on this next step, but I think a key part to keep remembering is the best way your kids are going to learn any of this stuff is by paying attention to you. They are constantly paying attention to you. You know, remember, I don't know if you guys remember the surveys you probably did in high school where, I don't know, you surveyed about this or the other thing, how you feel about stuff, and then you might have just filled in random stuff because they were just surveys that got sent out. Well, there's been a lot more scientific ways of doing that, figuring out from kids what they think. And the number one about any problem, I don't care what it is, whatever the kids are thinking about or worried about, the number one solution for every kid is they look to their parents to figure that out. Even if you feel like you're not connected to them, they're watching your behavior. They're watching how you respond to your own situations. They're paying attention to just the fact that you're there, your presence. You don't have to say the right thing. Who knows? There is no right thing. There's just what we are in the moment. And I think what matters more to them than anything else, I'm sure we're going to get into this now too, is just you're there. You're there. You got to show up. And for me, one of the fun parts, does anybody have a 20-something in your life? Yeah, I love 20-somethings because it's like you get to see this reflection back on what you didn't know if you were connecting or not. I mean, you just don't. Teenagers aren't going to give you that feedback necessarily. And then there will be that moment when they are mid-20s where it all come together for them. They'll recognize what I have my daughter, my middle one, she was our challenge one. The boys were kind of pretty laid back, but our daughter, feisty thing, which is serving her well as a 25-year-old. But she was super feisty, and everything we did or said, she pushed against us, especially me. So for her, now at this point in her life, when she can reflect back on it, now she finally said something where we were cleaning up her room, and she used to write stuff down, which is a good thing to do. I'll get to that in a second. But she wrote down, "I hate you, Mom, you're awful, you don't respond ever, you never listen to me, blah, blah, blah," whatever. And so she still kept it because she keeps everything. So she was reading through it, she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I said this." And so it was helpful for her to have that moment to see, you don't need to be sorry, that's developmentally appropriate. That's how you're learning this emotion, you're learning to work through your emotions. You did nothing wrong. And I probably got so mad at you sometimes, I'm sure I did and said something I would regret now to say. I regretted it in the moment because we're emotional and respond emotionally. So there's what she basically got back to when she was explaining to me, which is what these surveys are getting back to us. That older teens and young 20s universally say what was mattered the most was you were present. You were there. That's all they really cared about. You were there, you listened, you didn't run away. So as my daughter put it, my husband and the boys were just, as soon as she was in a temper tantrum, they were just, "Someone's gonna be gone." And she recognized it even then, but even more so when she got older. I know, they're like, "What's like cockroaches? I don't know what that is." But as soon as she was,
I recognize this.
yeah. So when you're in the trenches and you're just there, your presence and available, that matters more. And it was important to her too. She was able to reflect on that, just showing up for those special things they do in school, being in the stands. They don't care if you cheer for them. They don't care if you talk about it later. They don't care if you're involved actually with the potlucks or whatever. Just that you showed up, you physically were there. Then they know that you're listening to them. You're the backboard. You won't give up on them no matter how horrible they are for whatever moment they're going to be horrible in that moment. And they are horrible. They're just dealing with learning these next stages, and it's hard. It's a hard time in life. So some of the things that can help with this, first of all, cut yourself a whole lot of slack because that is the most important thing to do. And if you're doing that, you're already doing more wonderful things for your kid than you can ever imagine. But a couple other things that can kind of help with that. If we think about that eating, sleeping, and exercising, I was kind of rolling my eyes when I said that because I don't know anybody who actually does a really good job with that. But for kids, one of the pieces that's hard about that is sleeping. There are a lot of reasons why it's really hard for teenagers to get a good night's sleep, and they're mostly run sleep deprived. Part of it is there's been some cool research, and I understand you guys, the kids don't start school until like 8:30, right?
10 after 8.
Okay, that's not even great. No. So I don't know if you guys have heard of this. That would be, we can improve on that. Yeah. The University of Minnesota did a big study, and there was a follow-up study of another place somewhere in the country, I can't remember what it was, where they checked to see if you adjusted the hours of when kids start school for the different times. So if you want to change things here, it's kind of nice because it happened at the University of Minnesota. But they created a new plan in a couple of the huge high schools in the Twin City area to adjust the schedule. So little kids went to school first, the older kids went to it late. They just readjusted the schedule. And there were complaints and backlash like there is whenever we have new changes. But what they ended up finding was a whole bunch of things that improved beyond the obvious. A good night's sleep can do a lot for you. So their grades went up, behavior was better. There were less car accidents because they weren't sleep deprived. Their attitude and feeling about life and in general improved dramatically just by getting an extra hour of sleep. And part of this that teenagers, that your hormones, we are going to talk about hormones, change your sleep cycle. They can affect it. So your body's wired to stay up late and sleep in the morning. That's physically how they're wired. But also too, there's a rapid time of growth and change in your body. They require as much sleep as a preschooler does, a toddler does. But they're not getting that. Your toddler sleeps that long. A teenager does not sleep that long. And then they have all these other competing demands on their life, socially and emotionally. They're trying to get all this other stuff done. And we all know how you feel about blue light or not when you go to bed, but having a screen in front of you, which of course they're probably going to have a screen in front of them, does not help with your sleep either. So recognizing that your teenager's already struggling with their sleep cycle to begin with, whatever you can do to make that experience be better for them. And I think sometimes it does help. I'm picking on my daughter. She'd kill me if I was doing this, but she was the only one who was up late with our son. So we just had to make a rule in the house. I actually had to have the cell phone. I had to have it. And she got mad about it for like a hot second. And then when she realized, and then when we took it from her, just overnight, she'd get it in the morning, she actually appreciated it. Because it gave her an excuse why she wasn't texting, like, my parents are so horrible, I take myself away, whatever. We always left it that we could be the horrible persons just to make it easier for her, because she recognized she was getting exhausted trying to stay up on these on her all the different social media that she was doing. It was impossible to ever have an end to it. There was always another friend who was awake who would text her one more time and get mad at her if she didn't text him back. So it kind of helped to have that be a family rule and just take it on, and you could be the bad guy on that one. Because it was easier then. She didn't have the social maturity to be able to say, I think it's kind of late now. That would not go fly over well with the social media. So so with the sleeping piece, whatever you can do to make that be easier for your adolescents. Recognize and respect to have as much consistency as you can with that, and whatever you can do to help your adolescent get as much sleep as possible. And of course, eating's a good idea, but kids eat junk food because they like junk food. So it's one of those things where it's nice. They're going to eat junk food. You don't have to have a hassle about that. You just want to make sure you have some healthy food around that's easier for them to eat quicker, something that's a quick snack. So whatever works good for you, that can also help too. And exercise, I know we say that as an adult with exercise, but I would like to change that word to say it be play. We all need to play. We all need some physical activity because our bodies were designed to be physical. But I think if it's more of a playful thing, so instead of thinking, oh, I gotta go to the gym. If it was something your kids like doing that's fun for them, going for a walk, just hanging out with their friends, whatever. And one of the things we found that is kind of an easy thing, is just running in and of itself is not a bad thing to do. Because you can run any length of space and you're gonna feel better. It's an easy thing to do, and any kid can do it at any time. So if they're on a sport team or not a sport team, if they like that, if they don't, it doesn't matter. Running is a good thing to do. It's easy, it's cheap. And I noticed this with our kids, and I've noticed it with other kids that I know who are runners. When they're feeling stressed, that's an easy go-to thing to do. They always feel better when they're done. And it can be a small amount of time frame. And for me as a parent, I always noticed when my kids were more upset if they went out for a run at an odd time. Ooh, something's up. Then it's one of those times then you want to make sure you're a little bit more around. That is weird. Something must be up with you. They decided you need to have around. And they'll say, oh, it just felt so good. Okay, then you want to be more available. What's happening that made you feel like you needed to do that at that time? It's just kind of more like a clue. So there is a good, here's some good suggestions, and you guys can do with them as you please. Every kid's different. Like I would say, again, back to my own three, each of them would deal with stress in a slightly different way. So you guys know your kids. So here's just some suggestions and think what you want. But one of the best things to do is to encourage them to talk at any time. And I know that seems lame, like they're going to roll your eyes, whatever. But also too, you want to, if you actually state that, you can talk to me anytime, and then be sure you're doing it on the other end. If they say, Mom, do you have a second? Drop what you're doing. Yes, I have a second. And I tell this to my friends, and they don't believe me. They think, oh, shoot, I got past them being little. Now I'm going to have some time to myself. It's going to be easier. My kids are older. Maybe I'll pick up extra hours at work. No. Probably the time your kids need you the most is when they're teenagers, because you want to be able to be available. So it's a time to think through in your life, pass it on to your friends. They actually need you more when they're a teenager than they did when they were little. So you sort of want to plan that in your life plans too. Don't assume just because they know how to use the bathroom on their own more or less and can get dressed more or less that's it. You don't have to be, there's something else you need to do. So being available to be there to talk to them. And I think one of the pieces, if you recognize something's up, they kind of need permission to take that next step. So you can say, I know this is hard, but I just want you to know I'm here. I love you, I want to help. So throwing in that I love you, I'm here, and I know it's hard to talk about stuff sometimes, but you can talk to me about anything. That's kind of a nice thing to set up too, because big problems will happen, and you want them to feel comfortable talking to you about anything. And it's actually harder when they go off to college because then they have really big problems. And you want them to feel honest, them to feel comfortable approaching you about anything. So you just lay it out there and then just be quiet. This is hard for me. It's hard to be quiet. I want to fill that gap with, I'll just tell you a bunch of other stuff. But being present can be super helpful. So one of the things I found was the car. And now we live in a rural area, so it didn't matter wherever we were going was a trip. The trip to the grocery store, that was a trip. And I liked having them in the car. I just found this out. So we tried not to have distraction in the car. So we didn't put in, back in the day when you put in DVDs and stuff, and I just never did that. So after a while, even though the kids, when they got older, of course they were on their phone or something in their car, but eventually they would get bored of that. They'd get bored enough they'd actually talk to me. And it's easier talking to somebody when you're in the car because you don't have to get eye contact. So, and it's easier for a teenager to approach you on anything that's really hard to talk about when they don't have to look you directly in the eyes. So doing a joint task. Now, riding a car worked for me. My husband liked doing things with the kids. He was super involved. My kids were on the theater, and building sets was something that he did as to be part of that. So he could be pounding on something with any kid, not even our kids, just another kid. And you don't have the direct eye contact, but you're in my space, so I might just say something and see what you do with it as a kid. I'm just going to throw it out there and see how you respond. So thinking of other activities that you can do with your kids that don't necessarily involve direct eye contact is great. So, raping, anything like that. If you're doing it with them, that's mostly when you're going to get those kind of conversations, those things are going to come out from them. The other thing too is you want to be really careful not to, you know something's up with your kid, something's bothering them, and you as a parent really, really want to know what that is, and it's hard not to keep asking them questions. So it seemed like you're upset. So why are you upset? I could tell you're upset. You were kind of more upset yesterday morning. What happened yesterday morning? That's a surefire way for them not to say anything, because they're also too assuming that there's supposed to be some right answer after this. I don't even know. Yeah, I'm in a bad mood, but I don't know why. And what do you want me to answer, parents? It's kind of hard. So you want to leave it really open-ended and more reflective in your understanding that it's showing up. Now, when kids are anxious, you think about it, there's times where they just seem anxious in that moment, and there's times that they're going to anticipate something that's anxiety-producing. So a couple more things to think on that one too. They offer, and I think this is a really good idea in general, like go back to what worked good when you were teaching potty training or anything. Having something that's repetitive that you can go back to is easier to remember. So their suggestion here is they have a 6-step suggestion to breaking down a problem. You know your family best, however many this works, but this is their suggestion. So the first one, so if it's 6 points, you're going to easier to remember that. There's 6 points to remember. I'm facing a problem, what do I need to do? So the first one is identify the problem. The next one is list the possible outcomes for what might happen for that. So list your options of what you could do and what those possible outcomes would be. Then you want to compare the options, choose the best one, and then make a plan to follow through on it. And then when you're done with it, you totally always want to reflect on it. So just for fun to kind of put this through, somebody name out one of the things you wrote down when you were a teenager that made you anxious. I mean, it's ancient history, we were teenagers.
Leaving for college.
Leaving for college is a really good one, super anxiety producing. There's like a million things to do that. So if you think about if it's leaving, like leaving home, college, okay. So then you identify the problem. So you list the options and possible outcomes. Well, you are going to school because you made that decision, but you're not ingrained to it. It's not like it's a law. So an option could be not to go to school. That's an option, right? And then an option could be to go to school, but to come up with some regular communication types. So then you list out those options that seem reasonable, just a couple. And then when you start to compare them, you think, well, I was probably not going to quit school. That doesn't seem like a realistic option, right? So maybe your option's more on what is it that I'm missing? So to make plans for when you're going to be back home and how you're going to communicate with those at home. So then, but you really want to walk through it. And it's a good way to teach a kid how to walk through major problems of all. Do I get a divorce or not? It's the same kind of thing that you're walking through that level of problem solving. So when you help them walk through it, I think too that recognizes I'm not stuck. So the leaving for school is super anxiety producing because it seems so permanent. Like if I leave, I can't come back. I made this is my first big life decision to make, and what if I made the wrong one? Everything will be horrible. That's typical for a teenager to think. And the part of our brain that actually helps us recognize those pros and cons to something isn't fully developed until you're in your late 20s, which just seems odd when we think about that, right? So if somebody that age still has a hard time understanding, so what if you did make the wrong choice? So you could go to college. Now we look at this adults, you chose that college, you found out it was a bad one, so you could just transfer. Yeah, it'll feel bad at the moment, but now looking back on it, no, that might have been the right decision. Then you end up at another college with a degree that you like better with friends that fit you better. That was a good decision. But in the time, it's hard to make that. So when you're helping your kids figure out how to break out a problem, and I think as adults, we can do that too with our own situations. If you feel overwhelmed with something and having to work a giant project that's coming up, if you're showing your kid how you separate that out and make it less overwhelming to break down pieces, that can be a great learning lesson for them. Now, reflective listening is something that's kind of hard to do because we want to do this in all situations with them. It's listening without judgment. So it's really hard to say, we want them to feel better and to say, oh, that's silly. Why would you worry about that? That's not a big deal, kind of a thing, which we have a tendency to throw that out anyway. So a phrase that works really good, and I use this at the hospital all the time, is a lot of teenagers worry about, or a lot of teenagers think about whatever it is you think your kid is concerned about. That opens it up instead of, I'm not telling you or I'm not labeling you right now as being worried about going to school. That is a common concern. A lot of kids are concerned about that. We can reflect on our own personal experiences about how scary a transition that is. But if you're talking about a lot of teenagers, a lot of kids your age, or a lot of people your age worry about blah, 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 then you're also reinforcing you're not nuts for being worried about this. And I'm not directly calling you out on this. I'm just having a general conversation about how challenging that is to go to college. It's a little easier than for them to make that next comment, to build on that conversation. And when you're reflecting on their feelings, you can use your reflective statement. Say, it seems like, or I've noticed, blah, blah, blah. I've noticed you seem a little stressed lately. I'm here to listen. And if the kids say, well, I don't know, I'm just, all this stuff and getting ready for school. So then you can say, then you want to reflect back. You don't want to give that a labeling on that piece. Like, well, that's pretty common. I mean, everybody's, I remember being there. Your brother was scared too when he went up to school. Whatever, he's fine now. Instead you say, so it's scary, all this thinking about going to school. You just repeat back what they say in slightly different words. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm scared. I'm scared because, like, I don't know if I picked the right dorm room. I don't know, my new dorm mates, it just seems a little crazy. You can kind of narrow it in more to what it is they do. When you do reflective listening, they'll narrow and focus that next comment into more specifically what it is they're concerned about. And you just repeat what they said in a slightly different way. So you're worried about your roommates. So I can hear you thinking about your roommate. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see what she wrote? I looked her up on Facebook. She doesn't seem like a total my case. So then you get more specifically into what it is. Okay, so then you can get more into the problem solving when you get more of the problem is. What if she is in that case? What would be the worst case scenario? Let's figure that one out. What would happen? Well, it would be awful. Okay, so what sort of solutions would you have? Let's see. How could you find that out for yourself? What solutions would you have? And then encourage them to look that up on the school's webpage to find out how one gets out of a bad roommate situation. I'm sure there's something on there. Those common themes are going to be a reference point to that. But you also want to validate their feelings too, because it makes sense. Of course, yeah, that makes sense that you would, there's a lot of new things that you're dealing with right now. So you're the reflective piece of it, but you're also giving them that statement saying their emotional life has validity and its importance. So this one's really hard to do because we think this isn't negative, but it is. When we want to avoid negative labeling, so you don't want to refer to okay, you're just kind of shy, honey. We know you've always been a little shy. So it might be hard for you to meet new kids at school, but you just get out there and give it a try. That's super negative. You're sending a message that the emotional response that they're having was not appropriate. You've labeled them in something that may or may not fit, and it's an ongoing changing piece anyway. So you want to change it more back to that positive piece. Well, you're really brave trying something new and different. That takes a lot of guts to put yourself out there. What kinds of things do you think might help? Then you're having more of a positive response to that same sort of reaction instead of reinforcing their own self crapping on themselves, kind of. Now, one of the things I think that's kind of super helpful to do too is find your own kids' own particular interests and ways of expressing themselves. And I don't know if anybody wants to share your kids or how they're like or what they're into. But I think too, sometimes it's really hard to take this all on and about. Conversation might not be their best way. My boys are not good verbal communicators, even though they're both writers. Sitting down and having a conversation felt awkward to them. So they did better when they responded in a way where we were respecting each other's usual way of dealing with stress. And then we can label it in a way to give them some idea of understanding that. So if you think about it, creating that story, however it works out best for you, can be super helpful. Writing things down can be really, really helpful. So did anybody have a journal or a diary as a kid? Yeah, I mean, and you might have only written it a little bit. It's kind of interesting looking back at it now as an adult anyway. If you still have it, it's kind of fun to share that with your teenagers because it's actually your handwriting and you're writing down some of the same issues they're dealing with. It's always good to be for them to see you in that place too. So the stories you can share with them on what you dealt with when you were their age is helpful anyway. But writing down things is super helpful because by the process of writing it down, you organize your thoughts a little. And then if it's their own journal and no one else sees it, just them, even just giving them a blank book can be really helpful. More so than even typing something in and storing it somewhere on a computer, it's more personal when you write it. But also too, you can do a lot more things when you're writing. You can show your anger so much more with how you scribble something or a doodle you put on the side. Or once you start working through a process of being frustrated, upset about something, you start to see your own problem solving in the writing because you can see yourself start writing, figure out the solution, and then think of some other things you're just writing that have nothing to do with it. You can see that when you reflect back on it. So giving kids a journal is really helpful if you, as another idea. Now with kids, especially this age group, social media can be an advantage and a disadvantage. Our internet can be your friend, not friends. It's also full of a whole bunch of negative images about what you aren't. You know, there's a lot of pieces on there what you're not measuring up to, which can create that stress in your life. So if you want to, a good way to turn it and flip it on its side is having kids tap into those things that help them recognize we were all at a place where we didn't have it all figured out, the stresses that are hard to be a teenager. They do get resolved as we get older. And it's hard for us to say that, but I don't know, have you guys been paying attention to what Stephen Colbert has done with the Awkward Teenage Pictures post? It's a money raising thing for Puerto Rico. It's fun to take a look at those because that is turning social media on its hip. So you're using it kind of against itself. So these are famous people who are all gorgeous now, but they're almost awkward teenage pictures they were posting. So that kind of stuff is fun just to point out to your kids in general, not when they're in an anxious moment, but just in general because this is an anxious time in your life. And there are a lot of stories like that, or looking at yearbooks or looking up yearbooks of stars or people like that. But even to the yearbooks you have in your house, if you have older kids and younger kids, it's nice just flipping through it and realizing some of you don't even know how much we changed in that time frame, and that they also too are going through a transformation. They don't have to own who they are at any particular time, that they're continually evolving as individuals. It's kind of a nice thing. So also too, you can use movies, television shows. I kind of think this has to do in general. Your kids aren't anxious. So all story plot lines have conflict in them. That's how you create a story. So if you're watching a movie with kids, even asking them, geez, she seems really upset. Would you be that upset if that happened to you? Kind of thing while you're watching a movie. Or what do you think of that character? Because I thought that was weird when they did X, Y, Z. What did you think? Those are ways to help express and think through emotional content about somebody unrelated to you, and it can be super helpful. And video games in and of themselves too as content. Does anybody have boys here? It tends to be a more boy thing anyway too. And as annoying as video games themselves can be, they're actually really helpful in terms of relaxing. Which is the opposite. It's hard for me, and video games are geared more toward men. But it's also a really relaxing thing because you actually, if you try to put somebody in hypnosis, has anybody ever done hypnosis or let yourself be hypnotized? The action, what happens in a video game is exactly what happens when the goals set are when you're trying to hypnotize somebody. So, and that can be for good and wrong. I mean, it's hard when you're trying to call them for dinner because, you know, they're in their game. But it's all going to be really relaxing because it's a way to shut out the world for a little bit and have that relaxing effect that you can get when you get hypnotized too. So depending on what you want or don't want your kids and whatever kind of guidelines you're setting for them, there is an advantage to that as well. Yeah, they actually feel better when they're done. And you think just the opposite. You think they're all riled up, you know, but no, they actually feel more relaxed when they're done. And then also, yeah,
It's where you don't want to see your child be so hypnotized.
Setting limits, right?
Yeah.
Plus, I did
Not attractive.
Yeah, plus it helped my 20s drove me crazy. If I listened to one more video game, I thought I was going to go insane. Yeah, I liked it when they got into Skyrim because it was actually sort of like a story. You know, it wasn't like just the sound and the background noise of the video game drove me insane. Yeah. I'd be in a different room. I just like worked on my last nerve. And but it's odd then you think about it. When it drove me crazy, that was actually relaxing them, which seems like the opposite, right? But same with sports. If they're into sports or not, any physical activity is going to be helpful. But choir and band can be really helpful too, because you have to take deep breaths for all of these things. And whenever I try and encourage deep breathing for kids, they usually roll their eyes like, please, it sounds like, They're not as attuned to why they're like catching up to how important that is, and they're too old for bubbles, which is great for little kids. So with this age group, there's things that they're actually not doing, the things that they think are fun anyway, because you do a lot of deep breathing and quiet. You're taught diaphragmatic breath and breathing. So I like to call the kids on that. So I'll explain to them how taking a deep breath can actually work with their pain medication to make them feel better, can help them get an IV started or whatever. But before I set it up, because as soon as the eye roll, they're not listening to me anymore anyway, I'll ask them, are you in band, sports, or choir? And they'll be in something, usually they're in one of those things. And I'll say, well, you've already done this before, so we're just gonna tap into the skill you already got, but it's gonna help you it's gonna help you with the stress of this moment. It actually works with your body. You're gonna physiologically change things in your body, and your body's biochemical response to this. So when you put it out that way, it doesn't seem like, okay, all right, yeah, that makes sense. And so they've already done those deep breathing. So whatever it is that they've done, if they played an instrument, a band instrument, most of them will, they've already done that before. So imagine you're blowing a long, slow note on that clarinet and you don't want it to squawk. Okay, so do that with me. And then just have them practice in through your nose and out through your mouth. You don't squawk the clarinet like that. And then they'll the first time they'll go, I'm like, okay, do it again. Okay. And you can start to see it. You see their whole body start to relax. And the parents notice it right away because it's their kid. And they're like, okay, one more time. And then I'll even point it out to them that by that third time, your shoulders had already dropped. The tension had moved away from your face. It's easy. You can do that anytime, anywhere, whatever you're doing. But with kids, I think it helps if they already recognize they're already doing it. That's part of the reason why choir and band and sports are fun. You're taking deep breathing all the time to do those things. If you're with your friends and they're making you laugh really hard, like you're peeing your pants, laugh really hard, you're taking deep breaths. That's part of the fun of being around friends or watching family too again. So having them tap into those things they already know are super easy to do too. Now there's has anybody here ever gone to teenshealth.org? Teenshealth.org, it's a website. I strongly recommend it, write it down. It's an offset off of kidshealth.org, and there's a lot of websites out there, so it's kind of hard to know which way to kind of channel somebody. This particular website has a lot of money. I thought it was like government sponsored or something because it was so well done that somebody had a lot of money to do this. But it's a hospital out on the East Coast that started it originally and then just built this really great thing and got more money to it. So they created something that's really great. It's kind of fun because they have a whole section obviously about stress. It's a common piece for teenagers. And they have teenagers talking about stress and what they do to help take care of their own stress. But they also have a lot of other things in there. When your kids are at the age where they're wondering, is this normal, this thing that my body's changing? Is this something, what is that? And bullying, everything about the kind of things that are typical concerns, stress-related points for kids. So they can self-check that out themselves. It's logical, it's not condescending. Sometimes information like that is tries to sound too cool or too hip. It doesn't do that, and it's not over their head. It's practical language, practical information, easily found, something they can look up on their own. So they're kind of too embarrassed to ask a question, they're sort of wondering, and then once they get into it, then I think it's a place for them that they can look back for other information too. But as parents, it's kind of nice to tap into it because they reflect on some studies and things that have been done with stress with kids, with teenagers. And it's just kind of fun to hear from teenagers' own voices. So when you're listening to it, you kind of get that perspective of what your teenagers, just as typical as you can imagine, when you hear the same words coming out of another teenager's mouth. And the kids they have on it are very typical kids. So there's a couple pieces in there about some self-ideas of things that can help with that. So sometimes that might be a better thing. If you're depending on your kid, you might just do better with that. So this is awesome website, you check it out, let's take a look. Or if they're wondering to look for something basic, like, is this wart on my foot something to worry about? They have a lot of things on that. So once you introduce it to them, they'll explore it on their own. And it's another concept for them to be able to self-do, because again, if you're feeling more control, you're gonna be less stressed. So kids doing it for themselves. Now they're old enough at this age to do more relaxation and imagery pieces. Has anybody here ever done that? It feels good, right? Little kids drop into that easily. Their imagination is such that they almost are always in an imaginary. They're doing mental imagery constantly when they're in a big dramatic play scenario. They can easily just fall into that. With teenagers, it's not that hard to direct them to it because they're kind of naturally doing it anyway in a lot of ways. But as parents, you can help. I think it's smart, and one of the good ways to help practice doing that is before you go to bed at night. And good times to think about that is the time where it'd be hard to fall asleep anyway. It's really hot or something, or you're sleeping in a place that's uncomfortable. You're all hauled up in the living room of some relative's house for whatever. If you start to help them figure and practice that out when they're going to bed at night, it's a quiet, uninterrupted time. And if they can practice it then, they'll get more and more skilled at it, and they can do it for themselves in all different scenarios. But it's hard to tell a kid that because it can get the eye roll if you don't give them something more specific that's more meaningful. So what I do with the teenagers a lot at the hospital is I have them, depending on them and their personality and what they're into. But if they were going to make a movie about themselves, so let's say they're in a reality TV show and they have to reset the set somewhere. So if they were walking home, what's the first thing they would do coming home from school? So they'll first like, they'll kind of fidget and roll their eye, and they'll say, well, where are you walking your home? The front door. Okay, so where's the doorknob? Is it on the right or the left? Stop and think. They'll look up. They're thinking. They're already not distracted. It's on the left. Okay, now they're already pretending because they're reaching out for that doorknob. So once you open up the door, you push in, push out, and you push in. So what's right there? What's the floor like? There's tile, and then and then. So what would you do first? You were coming home from school, and then they usually laugh and throw the backpack on the floor, of course. And then what do you do first? Oh, you look for food, right? So as they're walking through and thinking it through, as if they were making a movie, and that's a common piece a kid can think. So going through the detail of a place that already is comforting to them, home, with the details of what it is they see, what's on the wall, what's on the floor. If you're going to recreate this set, what would you see? It's an easy piece to get into without realizing they're actually doing imagery when they do that. And they can pick that up wherever they're at. When they start to get good at that, they can create whatever other storyline they want to. And I think that's kind of a fun thing to have on their phones or something, favorite vacation places. That might be all the prompt that they need just to think about that. But if you were going to describe this as a story, how would you start? What was happening in that point when you took that picture, kind of thing. So I do have apps, if you guys are interested in this. I'm going to pass these around so you guys can have these too if you want it. These are different apps for breathing, distraction, interactive stuff. So there are a lot of relaxation stuff online, so people will walk you through it who are really good, who have that voice, they're like, oh, you're giving me the phone book and I do relax. But if your kids are self-actualizing this themselves, so they put it on their own phones, they can listen to themselves. Then choosing for themselves what's relaxing. These are ones are pain and palliative care. These are ones that they particularly like. And I realized it was dated a year ago, but I think most of those apps are up. So if there's something, and I think too as an adult, it's just kind of nice to have these for yourself. So if you guys are accessing these things on your own, your kid sees you doing it, again, the biggest thing they do is watch you and see what you're doing. But it's hard raising a teenager, so it doesn't hurt to be relaxed too. So these are different things that are just kind of mindless, fun activities to do. I really like the koi pond. I have that on my iPad at work. It's actually for the kids, and I think I play with it more. There's a little fish, and you get to just swim around. There's water, and it's just like mess with the fish, and they move. That's all you do. It's just really calming. So look through and see. I mean, it's something you get. It's kind of fun just to have for yourself. But if you guys load them on your phones and you mess around with them yourself, your kids will be intrigued anyway. But I like this piece for older kids because they do have some walk-through imagery pieces that you can do with the meditation parts. So this whole section on meditation, you can, depending on how much you want to get into it, I think it's kind of smart just to look for it yourself, like try the free ones and see what you think. In Wellscapes, I don't know if you guys probably, dental office and stuff often have that just on there, or doctor's offices often have that just on in the background. Those are just pictures of places, but you hear the sound and stuff in the background. And depending on who you are and your kid and what they like or don't like, I think, again, it just makes them feel more in control when they get to choose. Oh, I like this one better than that one. This would be kind of fun to have on my phone. I'm choosing to put it on my phone. And then I'm choosing to use it whenever I want to use it. All those parts of feeling more in control of yourself and your response to stuff is kind of nice. And then with also too with kids, anything that you're doing that gives them that more sense of control and choice, whatever special thing that they're really into, is smart as a parent to make sure you're finding the time to support that thing that they're really into that's building their self-esteem. Because also too, I found one of the things I think is really helpful, we were talking about this with grandparents, to help kids deal with a stressful, anxious situation, not always as parents are we the best people to do it. It could be a favorite teacher. Grandparents are super helpful because they love their kids unconditionally, they love their grandchildren unconditionally, but yet they don't have the same power struggle relationship that you do with your parents. So they'll echo some of the same things your parents just said, but at the same point too, they can be somebody you can be a little freer to talk to. So finding times for your kids to connect with other adults. My daughter which the one was hard. She had a dance. I didn't really like their dance studio. It was kind of expensive. She was kind of down with dance. But the person who taught the teenagers was amazing. She was this amazing young woman who really got kids, got them emotionally, was super supportive. I would have paid any money for her. I don't care if she learned how to dance, just to have time to hang out with that young woman, around 30, who was strong, independent, a good communicator, really the epitome of all the things that you want to like lean toward. I knew what the effect that she had on her was not teaching her to dance. The effect that she had on her was making her feel good about herself, with understanding what's hard about being that age. She was just a different person giving my daughter that message. She also had a really strong relationship with a theater teacher, so when she didn't make the dance line team, that person had more effect of helping my daughter than anything I could do on her side. So finding those people in your life that can connect with the kids and trusting them and having a good relationship with them and recognizing your kids need to do that to believe what it is you're saying. So, so for all this piece of a lot of information, does anybody have anything else that they wanted to bring up or add about their own kids or their own situations, their own grandchildren or nieces or nephews or whatever? And going back to those original discussions, maybe we can start there. When you guys just wrote down the stuff that you're anxious about, does anybody want to throw it out like something that happened to them as an adult? You're about to say something.
Well, I have a teenage boy, and he's angsty right now. October's going to be tough. He's got a lot on his plate.
What year is he?
He's a senior.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of things to do, and he's doing cross country and but and I looked at him and I said, I see you for 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, and unfortunately, part of what I have to do when I see you those 5 minutes is to check on the things that I'm worried about too, because we're both worried about this month for you, and he's having temper. I mean, I think teenagers have temper tantrums.
Mm-hmm.
So this month has been the breathing through temper tantrum 1, 2, 3 in a row until we finally like, I'm still here. But is it, and then he finally got to what was it. And it was just broke my heart, you know. And finally, after 3 times, I mean, but I had to stay and just hear things I'm safe, folks, so rage at me, fine, rage, okay, rage, I'm still here.
That's the only thing, you're just there. Because who do they have safer to rage against? But the person who loves them more than anything in this whole world. And you think of the different touch points of being a teenager. Every transitional point is hard for all of us. So the things we written down were probably something what made us stress was a transitional point, right? So leaving home, going to school, making decisions that are your first decisions you're making that affect your life one way or the other are super anxiety producing. At the same point too, there's a lot of competition between you and your friends, what everyone else is doing. And am I honoring myself on what I want to do or what I think I should be doing? I don't even know what I want to do. I can barely decide what I want to eat tonight for supper, let alone have all these pieces on them. And part of the things that I think naturally ends up happening, and I don't know if this is true as much here, but when we're super stressed, we have a tendency to want to do more things, right? Sign up for more stuff. And then that's one of those times too where you can help them see, okay, in your senior year, you're going to have all these things in front of you. What do you want to do and what are you ready to let go of? Because this is going to be a busy, crazy year. But also too, senior years in general, schools mostly plan on all kinds of traditional stuff. The seniors get this special walk when this prom happens, or the seniors get to be designated when it's the cross-country team's banquet. The seniors all get to stand up. There's lots of little things that naturally happen in that, and those little things break up the overwhelming piece of the transition that's causing the stress. Because instead of having to deal with it all at once, they're getting it a little bit at times. But at the same point too, those little bit of times are constant reminders of this very stressful thing that's coming up in front of me that can make it overwhelming too. And at the same point too, whenever your kid is really stressed, likely you are too. So making this transition is not just your child's transition, it's yours as well, kids, very young adults. So the combination of all that piece on how are we going to make this transition as a family, what's planned, and being honest with your own feelings about that too. You know, how does this, I'm having to deal with leaving. Except, that's a really hard thing to do as a parent. It's super hard. It's like one of the hardest things all you got to do. So how you break that down for yourself and you're communicating with them about that makes it easier for them to see, yeah, I'm having a really hard time thinking about leaving. I know I'm supposed to be like mature and adult and stuff, but I kind of like this plan, how you feed me and, you know, get clothes for me and buy stuff for me, and I just get to hang out with my friends. This is a good, solid plan. Yeah. So when you're helping them see those pieces, I think it helps to kind of hear those stories about like how hard it was for you when you went to school. And it's nice to do that now, not when you're facing that. You have a senior at home. If you don't have a senior at home, tell them those stories about those different things that happened to you as a teenager. My kids did find my diary. I didn't even realize I still had it, and they found it. And at first I was kind of embarrassed because, you know, it's full of all that stupid stuff you say into a diary, right? But then looking back as an adult, it was really nice as an adult to see myself at the same point my kids were, to see, oh yeah, wait, I'm going on and on and on and on and on about nothing in here, and I can see that. So I can see that in my own kids' pain. Oh, what really helped with that was them to see me awkward, insecure, not knowing what I wanted to do or not, making those life choices and not knowing where they happen. And I think it's kind of nice too to build in, and that's why it's nice too when you get another generation telling them those same stories, because they can say, the biggest change that happened in my life was because I decided to go to McDonald's and not Burger King that day. Then it led on to a different path I didn't even expect. There's only so much of life we can control, and in fact, it's more living in the moment. So when you can offer kids up those experiences, I think that helps a lot.
I just want to piggyback on what you said about, okay, so because I've been noticing that there's some tension, there's some high tension with all three of my kids, and they're coming at me and they're just really loud and like yelling at me, and I'm like, I'm just trying to help you, like,
And you feel like this
and I don't think that's useful. I don't think my reaction, because then it kind of like shifts over to like, hey, can we just talk about this? But of course they're feeling a lot more emotions than, I'm just a little more even maybe, but so what a day. Like, just right now I'm exhausted, so I can't overreact to you.
I think that's kind of funny too, because it's the hardest if you're teenagers, it's the hardest with the parent.
Okay, so what is, okay, but I want some solid, like how do I react, like what is the most useful thing I can do in this situation? Because I came at 5:29 because I was in one of those situations at 5:25.
So you think about it, number one, you gotta take care of yourself, right? That's first. You can't do anything for your kids unless if they're driving you crazy, you just get the heck away from them for a little bit. And you think about those pieces where we're better as a society of taking care of you. When you had those children, when they came into this world, someone had a huge party for you. There was a shower. There's a lot of attention. You got cards. There was all kinds of different preschool. You had like tons of information on every little different thing they did developmentally. And then ours as a society, they turned 13. Yeah, good luck with that. So we don't get that kind of same support we need. So you kind of create your own little parenting group in general. So I found that really helps when your kid, whatever they're at, their sport ball thing, that's or whatever they're into, sitting in the stands with the people around you, they totally get exactly where you're at. So you got to find your people that are in the same place. If you could just limit like, oh my God, I just had like a 45-minute argument about her jeans. I'm gonna go crazy. And they'd be like, yeah, the other day, oh my God, it was her hair.
Well, and it's even, I mean, these are important things, but like I feel like what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, just can you relax a little bit? And I know that my reaction isn't helpful. How do I react to them? Because whatever, it just.
Jeff's the one that got me. He says, you're the parent with big pants. I'm like, okay, wearing my, let's do a mantra about wearing the mom pants.
Okay, there's a point where, okay, now do you feel like it goes over into like a little bit of, I'm just not going to talk about this with you. You're being really mean and you're blah, blah, blah. I mean, no, I'm not. I'm just saying I'm trying to, here's the solution I came up with, okay? 8 o'clock, you need to be home on a school night until further notice. We're going to see how that works for a while because things are getting, I'm exhausted. I'm not, finishing.
You did, or
this is what I came up with today. Like, and this particular child said, well, it just turned into all these other things. And I just, and it was, anyway,
It's hard
But
because it's.
I don't want to like say, wow, I mean, it feels like I'm bringing the focus on to how they're behaving, and that's not the point. So
I think it's one of those things.
I don't want to be abused though. Like, I don't want somebody yelling at me.
So you're teaching them something that's not okay. It's not okay to yell at me. Use your words that I can understand. So what is the problem? Would it help if you wrote it down? Just write down the problem. Just write it down. And you can hand me that piece of paper if it's easier for you. Or in order if you want me to help you, I'm here to help you. I'm always here. I'm ready to listen. But you can't talk to me that way. That hurts my feelings. It makes me feel bad. Then you're teaching them something on understanding how their behavior affects others, but recognize it too. And they're like, I just don't want to talk to you. It's usually, I just don't know how to talk. I don't even know how to express these thoughts and feelings I have in my head right now. So if you give them a way where you're helping them channel that in there a little bit, like, okay, how about we just need a break right now? Let's get back together at 8 in 5 minutes or something, and you get some time to think about this. Sort of in the same line what you might have done with them when they were preschoolers and they were in timeout. Timeout's for everybody. That's for you because you're ready to kill them. And that's also for the kid to give them some time to regroup, right? So give them a more mature timeout. And then they give you time to think, where did that even come from? And wait, no, let me just finish what I was doing, because kids have a tendency to dump on you when you're in the middle of something too, because you're vulnerable at that point. You're doing something that you can't, you're trying to get dinner on the table. Yeah, so if you even take that time, like, okay, I can't do that. And a couple things that kind of help with those reflective listening statements are also kind of like a way to pause, so you're trying to listen to them, but also too, it's a way to, like, where does that come from? What, you just threw that by me and I'm already busy trying to do something else. So it's the same like when kids come up to you when they were little and said, so like, where do babies come from? You're like, what? Where did that come from? When I was
You know, I just have to tell you a funny thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go.